Compelled by great compassion, you taught the sacred Dharma. To dispel all wrong views, to you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. Do not commit any unwholesome actions, engage in perfect wholesome actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. Om Sahaji Bhagi Chokshing Me To Tram Re Rapling Shi Ni De Kien Pa Di Sang Ke Shing Du Mek Te Po Wa Yi Dro Kyun Nam Dak Shing La Chö Bar Shuk. This ground anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all transmigratory beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Kuru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayami. Should I read the four measurables?
Yeah, let's read the four immeasurables.
How wonderful it would be for all sentient beings to abide in equanimity, free from attachment to friends and anger toward enemies. May they abide in equanimity. I myself will cause them to abide in equanimity. Please, Guru Deity, bless me to be able to do this. How wonderful it would be for all sentient beings to have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they have happiness and its causes. I myself will cause them to have these. Please, Guru Deity, bless me to be able to do this. How wonderful it would be for all sentient beings to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they be free from suffering and its causes. I myself will cause them to be free from these. Please, Guru Deity, bless me to be able to do this. How wonderful it would be for all sentient beings to never be separated from the happiness which is totally beyond suffering. May they be never separated from this. I myself will cause them to be never separated from this. Please, Guru Deity, bless me to be able to do this.
Yeah, so again, welcome back this morning to this first session today on the foundation of all good qualities and the three principal aspects of the path. So let's generate a virtuous motivation. Thinking, actually, we can use a verse from Shantideva. I need to share my screen. Okay. There we go. So Shantideva says, just as a flash of lightning on a dark and cloudy night, for an instantly brilliantly illuminates all. Likewise in this world, through the might of Buddha, a wholesome thought rarely and briefly appears. Yeah, so Shantideva uses this analogy of, on a dark and cloudy night is analogous for samsara. So in the suffering of oceans of suffering of samsara, then we've taken countless rebirths as hell beings, as hungry ghosts, as animals, even as human beings without any fortune to practice Dharma, and as gods and demigods. So in all those states of existence, and like 99.999% of the states of rebirth, states in which we take rebirth, there's no opportunity to meet teachings that clearly explain how to be free from the suffering of samsara, much less how to achieve enlightenment. As is explained in the Mahayana canon, much less how to achieve enlightenment on the basis of this precious human body, possessing the 5 elements and the 4 elements and the 6 constituents, which by practicing highest yoga tantra, one can achieve full enlightenment in this state, in one brief lifetime of this degenerate age. So now we've, taken human rebirth, which is extremely rare, and we've met the Buddha's teachings, which are extremely rare. And not only that, we've met the entirety of the Buddha's teachings, as has been inherited by the Tibetans from the masters of ancient India, in its entirety, complete with both sutra and tantra. And there's people who, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Lama Tsongkhpa, and many others, who genuinely practice the Buddha's teachings and explain those in an unmistaken way, and then themselves serve as peerless role models of what it looks like to practice well. So, yeah, we've encountered this incredible opportunity, and yet death is inevitable for each of us, and when death occurs is unpredictable. So it's essential that we make the most of this opportunity from right now, every day, every hour. And so one excellent way of doing that is to study and contemplate the Lamrim, which is what we're spending this weekend on. So yeah, thinking in order to benefit oneself, and thereby in order to benefit others whom we have karmic connection with in this life, in future lives, our family, friends, neighbors, our communities, our nation, our world. So yeah, then we must become quickly enlightened. I think for that purpose, I'll engage in this session. So in whatever way you can, generate the most powerful, vast, and far-reaching virtuous motivation. Mm. And then if you like, visualize Shakyamuni Buddha or Lama Tsongkhapa or any of your gurus in the space in front of you, or all of them. Visualize one figure or many figures, and representations of the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, and then generate the mind of refuge. Which is a wholesome fear of the suffering of not only this life, but future lives, especially rebirth in lower realms, and the suffering of samsara as a whole. And wishing to be free from that, and seeing how the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha have the power to protect us from suffering of samsara by clearly explaining the causes and how to be free of those causes, the antidotes. And then also with the wish to, seeing so many problems in the world. And the headlines this morning is, the famine in Gaza, inflicted by the Israeli government by restricting food. Yeah, and then so many other problems in our country and other countries, the world as a whole, climate change, and so forth. Not to mention, individuals, so many people whose lives are just very difficult in different ways. Yeah. I went for a walk this morning in Mountain View, where I stayed last night. I went to Pioneer Park. It's a park just near downtown Mountain View. And, it's just not uncommon. There's a man just sleeping on the bench still at like 7 o'clock in the morning. And yeah, I mean, who knows what's happened in his life that he's there sleeping on a bench. So in order to benefit all these countless sentient beings who have been our kind mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, friends, and family, then we go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Hey, can you show that Again, I don't have it up. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create, through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merit of two collections I create to explain the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my two collections of explaining the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient transmigratory beings. Okay, so welcome back. So we continue with the foundation of all good qualities and guru devotion. I said yesterday I would list well, let's review what we spoke about yesterday first. Maybe then I'll share my screen. So, yeah, yesterday we spoke. What did we speak about? About the greatness of the author, Atisha, and a little bit about Lama Tsongkhapa. Then the greatness of the teaching, the Lamrim, and especially the four qualities of the Lamrim. That it, and that before that I spoke about what the Lamrim is, the etymology of the Tibetan term. And then the four qualities of the Lamrim, let's see if I can remember them, that it helps us see how all the Buddhas are non-contradictory, helps us easily discern the intent of the Buddha, helps us to be able to see how to take each aspect of the Buddhist teachings as a personal instruction for our practice, and then also prevents us from falling into, for creating the great negativity of disparaging or belittling different aspects of the Buddhist teachings. So there's those four qualities of the Lamrim. So in short, the Lamrim, like I explained yesterday, is kind of like an overarching structure to showing how all the different aspects of the Buddhist teachings fit together as a path of practice for one individual. So it's a completely practice-oriented way of approaching Buddhist teachings. And I think this is the kind of thing that's taught most at Dharma centers in the West, especially at FPMT centers, because that's why people come to centers mainly, is not to study, not so much to study philosophy or to study specific sutras, but to get an idea how to use different aspects of Buddhist teachings to practice, to help. Reduce suffering in their lives and have happier lives. So, like I said then yesterday, the first Lamrim text was composed by Lama Atisha, A Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment. Actually, later this year in November, I'll lead a 1-week retreat based on. Actually, it's not that text. It's called Illuminating the Path, but it's His Holiness commentary on this Lamrim prayer by Lama Tsongkhapa. No, it's not really illuminating the path to enlightenment. But anyway, in November, and because we'll do there's one module on the Lamrim from Exploring Buddhism that we'll cover in a 1-week retreat at Vajrapani Institute in November. So there we'll cover all the same topics we're covering this weekend, just a bit more extensively. I was thinking to tell you though. So the meditations on the Lamrim was really kind of like the heart practice of all the Kadampa masters. Sometimes the Gelugpa tradition is called the new Kadampa tradition, because the Kadampa masters were these Tibetan monks who were direct disciples of Atisha when he came to Tibet. And some were direct disciples, and some came within a few generations, 2 or 3 generations after Lama Tsongkhapa, but most famous among them is like Geshe Potawa, Geshe Chekawa, Geshe Langri Tempa, Geshe, Kunbel. Anyway, there's several. So the Kadampa Geshes are renowned for having this very, very pithy advice about how to practice Dharma. But it's said that the Kadampa Geshes would be so familiar with the outlines of the Lamrim that they can just go through them in their mind in the time it takes to mount a horse, right? Which is just, 30 seconds or a minute or so, if you're good at it. Which I'm sure they were, because that's how they got around, right? So it's something to become very familiar with. And one excellent way to become familiar with the outlines of Lamrim is to recite daily a prayer like this, like the foundation of all good qualities, the three principal aspects of the path. Most, in the monastery, like all the monks and nuns, they memorize these. In the Gelugpa monasteries, this is like one of the first things you memorize. And we recite every puja, we'll recite one of these. And so if you have it memorized, then of course, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, not whatever you're doing, I mean, it's a bit exaggeration, but if you're going for a walk or sitting in a quiet place or wherever, waiting for the bus or something, then you can recite in your mind or think about in your mind and use. Okay, so then yesterday we started with the first topic. So the first topic in the Lamrim, basically, I want to give you an overview of the entire Lamrim now, and then also to remind me, okay, what the pace I have to go at to get through the entire thing in this weekend. I was just thinking while we're doing the motivation or the preliminary prayers, because it's easy to get caught up in too many details and then at the beginning, and then not have time to cover things well in the end. So so yesterday we started looking at, so the main topics in the Lamrim, there's two preliminary topics, which are how to correctly rely upon a teacher and the precious human rebirth, are like preliminary topics. And then the main structure of Lamrim is to divide according to these three levels of motivation. But you can think like this is called the three scopes, but Lama Zopa Rinpoche never likes that term, so he prefers, like the three capable beings, which, I don't really like that term because it just doesn't, I don't know, when you first hear it, it doesn't sound like much. But the three scopes doesn't either, I guess so. So the three capable beings, or the three scopes, or the three, But basically, it's the idea is that these topics of contemplation, that are the essence of the Buddhist teachings, they're divided up as into three groups according to the level of one's motivation, right? So for some who their main motivation, their main objective is to achieve happiness in future lives, then what do they do to achieve that happiness in future lives? What do they need to contemplate on? So as a basis for all those is correctly relying upon a guru and thinking of a precious human rebirth. But for a person whose main aim is to achieve happiness in future lives, then they think about impermanence and death, how death is going to come, and then what's going to happen after death, what are the possibilities, and then the suffering of the lower realms, how terrible it would be to take rebirth in hell or as an animal or as a hungry ghost, and what that would entail, right? In order to generate a sort of a wise kind of aversion or a bit fear of taking rebirth, and so to compel us or propel us to make sure we don't go there, right? To make sure we don't create the causes. We avoid creating the causes, and we create causes for a good rebirth as a human or a god. Thinking about the suffering of the lower realms. So there's impermanence and death, thinking about the suffering of the lower realms, and then refuge, thinking about the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, and why they're a valid refuge, why they have the power to protect us from those. And then the question, well, how did the Buddha Dharma actually protect us from those? Mainly by teaching us about karma, the law of cause and effect, and thereby enabling us to avoid creating negative karma and to know how to create virtuous karma. Because ultimately, in modern science, it's kind of the all-powerful thing is physics, the atom. The physical laws is considered like the most powerful forces in the universe are electromagnetism and used to be gravity, now it's more like what's Einstein's theory of general relativity. And then quantum, then quantum, at the quantum scale, there's a whole other kind of level of laws. But in the modern scientific view, like the most powerful forces are these physical forces that dictate how things interact. Because, human experience is just, in that view, human experience and our mind is just, it's kind of the activity of things in the brain. So in modern science, the most powerful forces are physical laws that govern the interaction of physical entities. In most religions other than Buddhism and Jainism, you could say, most theistic religion, the most powerful force in the universe is God, right? In Buddhism, you ask what's the most powerful force? It's karma, right? Everything's determined by karma. Karma is more powerful than the Buddha. He's more powerful than any teacher. So by understanding karma, we have incredible power, right? To understand how to avoid non-virtuous karma and how to create virtuous karma. And that's why we spend so much, we start every session with a virtuous motivation, because that's primarily what determines the kind of karma we create as our motivation, our intention. So that's the fourth topic, the fourth and final topic in the contemplations of a person of the small scope. Impermanence and death, suffering of the lower realms, refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, and karma. So if you want to achieve just happiness in future lives, if you just understand those things, you're set, right? And you have to practice, right, accordingly. And then, but then as long as we take rebirth and, as long as we take, even no matter how many good rebirths we take, like as long as we're still in samsara, we eventually die and take rebirth again. So that's not really like a lasting solution to our problems. So, So then the next level of motivation, the motivation of a person of a middle capable being, a person of the middle scope, is to be free from not just suffering of the lower realms and to have a good rebirth, but rather to be free from the suffering of samsara entirely, right? And so what are the topics of contemplation for such a being? They meditate on the sufferings of samsara as a whole, like sufferings that pervade all of samsara and samsara in general, which is all fit within the Four Noble Truths, the first noble truth. And then they meditate on the second noble truth, the truth of the origins of suffering. Well, why do we suffer? What are the fundamental causes, which are the afflictive emotions, the branch afflictive emotions, then the 6 root, and then the 3 root afflictive emotions, anger, attachment, ignorance being the most fundamental of those. So they generate, and then on top of that, an understanding of how we die and take rebirth. What's the process by which we're thrown into a rebirth in samsara again and again? And then in addition to that, the 12 links of dependent arising, the wheel of life, 12 links of dependent arising. And then the contemplation of, well, how can you be free from that? What kind of life do you need to lead to be free from and to eventually overcome the fundamental causes of samsara? And basically it's a life in which you keep vows and basically practice the 3 higher trainings. Training in higher morality, training in higher concentration, and training in higher wisdom. It's mainly wisdom that cuts the root of samsara. So that's the contemplations of the person of middling capacity, is suffering of samsara in general, the causes of suffering, how we die and take rebirth, 12 links of dependent arising as a bit more elaborate presentation of that, and then the 3 higher trainings. And there's other things in there, but those are the main things. So then the question comes, so if you want to be free from samsara, if you just meditate well on those things, then you can be free from samsara. But then the question comes, well, okay, imagine what if I'm free from samsara, but my mother of this life, and then my friends, my family, and not to mention those of past lives, they're all still stuck in samsara, suffering. Then, how, and if I don't do anything to help them, how petty that would be, how small-minded and selfish that would be. So then the question comes, well, in order to not only free myself from samsara, but to do, whatever I can, to do the most that I possibly can in order to help others to as well be free from samsara. What do I need to do? Then I need to become fully enlightened. So then there's a whole set of topics of contemplation for the person of the great capable being, of the great scope. So a person who aspires to do whatever is possible for a person to do in order to, achieve the welfare of others, right? Then there's topics of contemplation for the great scope. So those begin with the attitude of bodhicitta, and then taking the bodhisattva vows in a ceremony, and then practicing the 6 perfections, basically. The perfection of generosity, the perfection of morality, perfection of patience, perfection of joyous effort, perfection of concentration, and the perfection of wisdom, right? And then seeing that, even if we practice the 6 perfections well, it takes 3 countless great eons to become enlightened. So it takes a really long time to become enlightened. Then wondering, well, is there any way I can because we each have special karmic connections with certain individuals, that if we become enlightened, then we can benefit them in a way that no other enlightened being, no other person can, because we have a special karmic connection with them. So the longer our enlightenment is delayed, the more those beings have to suffer. The more rebirths those beings take, and the more they'll suffer. So the quicker we become enlightened, the more quickly we can help free other beings from suffering. So not in a selfish way, but in an altruistic way, then in order to more quickly serve the welfare of others, we need to quickly become enlightened. So then with that motivation, one looks to see, well, what's the quickest way I can become enlightened in order to reduce the suffering of others? And the quickest way is to practice the path of Tantra, right? To practice Tantra. So then there's a whole presentation of the practices of Tantra as part of the Lamrim. Although generally, in most Lamrim texts, there's just a mention of Tantra at the most. There's not extensive explanation, because one unique feature about Tantra is in order to receive explanations and engage in the practice of it, the first thing one needs to do is receive an initiation from a qualified teacher, and then keep the vows and precepts that are given as part of that initiation, right? So without initiation, then one shouldn't even see like images of tantric deities, not to mention, other things to do with Tantra, and hear explanations of Tantra in general. Although for several reasons, one is that because as Buddhism, because as I mentioned yesterday, among the different cultures where Buddhism exists now, Tantra is the teachings on Tantra from ancient India have been most well preserved in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and they're very prominent in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. So since 1959, when the Tibetans came into exile, before which they had hardly any contact with the outside world, then, as Tibetan Buddhism has become more well-known and widespread and more studied and understood, then, of course, all ideas and practices and text around Tantra have also become more widely known, and also imagery around Tantra have become more widely known, and a lot of misconceptions have arisen regarding Tantra. And so to dispel many misconceptions, then His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Lama Yeshe, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and other teachers have spoken, about many aspects of Tantra that are not especially there's not especially a lot of danger that they be misused or misunderstood in a public way, to people who even don't have initiation. So in one reason to dispel misconceptions, like one early misconception among Western academics studying Buddhism was that Tantra was like a Tibetan thing, something that the Tibetans sort of made up mainly. Or like they used to call Tibetan Buddhism Lamaism, right? That the whole thing of like seeing your teacher as a Buddha was something that the Tibetan Lamaism is, it's like the Tibetans made that up, right? But clearly they didn't. No, that's from ancient India and from authentic, tradition, from the Nalanda tradition. That's also one reason His Holiness so emphasizes so much that Tibetan Buddhism is really an extension of the ancient Nalanda tradition. It's mostly, what we study, and the basis for practice is almost entirely commentaries composed by masters of ancient Nalanda, like Nagarjuna, Shantideva, Chandrakirti, Asanga, Vasubandhu, Gunaprabha, and others, right? So, so on one hand, His Holiness speaks about, spoken about Tantra in quite, many aspects in quite detailed way in order to dispel misconceptions, but also just because there's many aspects of Tantra that even without initiation, if you learn about it, can be very helpful. Like, for example, about the detailed description of the death process. For even someone who's not Buddhist, just if they're, they or someone close to them is approaching death and they want some more explanation about what's going on, then there's incredible, clear, detailed explanation in tantric teachings about what happens in the death process and how to use that, the process of dying in a way that that brings the most peace and calm and kind of joy to the mind, even through that process, which helps to ensure a good future rebirth. So also just in order to benefit beings in general. And then Lama Yeshe, especially, when he first started, in the short time he taught Western students, he could see that, one of the biggest problems that his Western students have is very low self-esteem, just very negative ideas about themselves, and about their own potential. And so in order to help ameliorate that as a, solution to that, or to help reverse that, then he encouraged his students in the FPMT, what came to be the FPMT, to engage in some basic tantric practices like Vajrasattva, like doing meditation on Vajrasattva to purify negative karma and also generate a sort of divine pride, but more like a sense of identity with something divine, right? Rather than identifying with something kind of polluted and disturbing. So it's become kind of a part of FPMT sort of wisdom culture to right from intro level courses like 10-day courses or the Kopan November course to engage in some practices of Tantra even without having an initiation, like purification with Vajrasattva, or like 9-round breathing. Doing the 9-round breathing, where in the last 3 rounds you do this vase breathing where you hold the breath at your. That's totally from Tantra, right? But yet it gives a sense of this kind of innate potential for a blissful experience, just in a very short, quick way. And then also the meditation on the 8 absorptions at the time of death. Again, that's also from Tantra. And then also the practice of Lama Tsongkhpa Tsok in centers is also Tantra. But the point I was kind of digressing from is that the Tantra is part of Lamrim, but in most Lamrim texts, there's not much about Tantra, right? Actually, Lama Tsongkhapa himself, in his great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, he just mentions Tantra in a page or 2 at the very end. Then he went on to write a whole nother volume about Tantra called the Graduated Stages of Tantra, right? There's a whole nother text, which is still not translated in its entirety in English, I don't think, no. Parts of it are translated, but not the entire thing. But the idea being that that's for those who, once people take initiation, then they can study that. Okay, so Guru devotion. So we just continue with the first topic, Guru devotion. So yesterday, what did I explain about Guru devotion? Yeah, the importance of having a teacher. I explained the first verse, from the foundation of all good qualities. The importance of having a teacher. Why don't we look at that again now? And then, some of the basics about correctly relying upon a teacher. Yeah, and basically how to correctly rely upon a teacher is to see them in a pure way. And the importance of making effort at that. So today, as I mentioned this one of the students yesterday, I wanted to just explain I have to stop sharing and then open this. The qualities of a teacher. I'll just look at that briefly. So the main source for the qualities of a teacher is the Dodegyan, Ornament for the Mahayana Sutras by Maitreya Buddha, where he lists these 10 qualities of a teacher. So this is for a Mahayana teacher. Yeah, someone who teaches the path to enlightenment. But this is the most commonly kind of cited verse to describe the qualities that, when we're looking for a teacher, the qualities that we should look to see if that teacher has or not. So he says, rely on a Mahayana teacher who is disciplined, serene, thoroughly pacified, has good qualities surpassing those of the students, is energetic, has a wealth of scriptural knowledge, possesses loving concern, has thorough knowledge of reality and skill in instructing disciples, and has abandoned dispiritedness. So this verse you'll find this is quoted from the English translation of the Great Treatise on the Status of the Path. That's how it's translated there. But you'll also find in other extensive lamrims like Pobon Rinpoche's Liberation of the Palm of Your Hand and so forth. But so just to go through those qualities briefly, it says rely on a Mahayana teacher who is disciplined. Means they keep their vows. They practice pure morality, right? Serene means they have single-pointed concentration, right? So this is like the 3 higher trainings, these first 3. So discipline, they keep pure morality, they keep their vows. At the minimum, they keep the 5 lay precepts, and then in addition to that, if they have other pratimoksha vows, they're a monk or nun, they keep their vows purely. They have their bodhisattva vows, their tantric vows, and practice the morality of abandoning the 10 non-virtuous actions, right? So they have pure morality, pure ethical discipline. And then serene means that they have single-pointed concentration. So their mind is not very distracted. They have good mental focus. They have calm abiding, but at least they're not like, their mind is not carried away by afflictive emotions, and especially excitement and lethargy, that they have good mental focus. And then third, that they're thoroughly pacified. So this means that they've realized emptiness. Thoroughly pacifying the afflictive emotions only happens by realizing emptiness. So ideally, they have a realization of emptiness, or at least intellectual realization of emptiness. And then they have good qualities surpassing those of the students. So it's not like that in every field they have to know more than you, but at least in whatever they're teaching, they should know more, have qualities of just intellectual understanding, and then also experiential understanding, right? They should have more experiential realization than the students with regard to whatever it is they're teaching, right? And even within Buddhism, it doesn't have to be every topic. It's just the topic that they're teaching. They have, and for an example of this that's commonly given of this is like Atisha. Lama Atisha had many teachers, also I think over 120 teachers. But Lama Atisha, because he was just an incredible scholar, his view of emptiness was the highest view of the middle way prasangika view of emptiness. But some of his most important teachers, their view was either of the Chittamatra or of even of the Vaibhashika, was a much lower philosophical view. But he wasn't going to them to learn about the view. He was going to them to learn about bodhicitta, right? So because they were more expert in and more realized in bodhicitta, then they were incredibly beneficial to him, even though their philosophical view was lower. So it can be like that. And it can be the other way around. We could learn from one teacher about the philosophical view because they have a much better understanding, even though they don't seem to be, especially kind-hearted. No, although that would be a shame, but it's possible, no? Yeah. So as good qualities surpassing those of the student is energetic. Is energetic means like they have enthusiasm for teaching. They're not they're not lazy about teaching, but they're quite happy to put energy into helping the students. Has a wealth of scriptural knowledge means they've studied widely. No, they've studied not just some pith instruction like that they learned from the teacher, but that they have a good general knowledge of the Buddhist teachings, at least a good understanding of the Four Noble Truths, and then 37 aspects, 37 branches of enlightenment, and the Eightfold Noble Path, and three principal aspects of the path, the Lam Rim in general. They have a good broad understanding of the Buddhist teachings. So based on scripture, study of authentic scriptures. So they have a wealth of scriptural knowledge. And they're familiar with many of the sutras and tantras and the commentaries on those. And then they possess loving concern, that they have a pure motivation, that they have love and affection for others, right? That they genuinely want to help others. They're not teaching or practicing out of selfishness and arrogant pride or craving for worldly concerns, fame and so forth. But they have a genuine loving concern for others, especially for their students. And then they have thorough knowledge of reality. And so they have thorough knowledge of reality. This would mean, like, in addition to having intellectual understanding of emptiness or an inferential cognize of realizing emptiness, they have a direct perception of emptiness. Ideally, they've directly realized emptiness, perceptually realized emptiness. And then they have skill in instructing the students. So they're good at explaining things to the students. They can see the disposition and needs of the students, and they're good at instructing and explaining. And then they have abandoned dispiritedness. So they don't easily get frustrated. When the students just don't understand or not following instructions or whatever, they don't easily just give up. That they persevere, right? So then, but then you might wonder, well, where to find such a teacher? No, these days, and how do you know, like, they've realized emptiness or not? If you yourself haven't realized emptiness, yeah. I'll quote from Pabonka Rinpoche's commentary. I can find. But yeah, it's true. Some things, like if they've realized emptiness or not, is difficult to know. Like, we can't really know. But you look for the things that you can know about. Like, we can see if they're ethical or not. One advice, a friend, Venerable Sarah, she said she gives in intro courses, which I think is quite good. These days, there's so much information on the internet. So if there's someone you're considering taking a teaching from, Google them, and Google, and see if there's any scandals or something surrounding them, because you never know. And you'd much rather find out before you create a connection with them than afterwards. Not to say that you can believe everything that's posted on the internet, but you would want to know if there's some kind of scandalous thing about them, that's news information about them that's floating around. But the more important thing is to look at the behavior of the teacher themselves. So do they have ethical behavior or not? Do they seem subdued in their senses, or are they just kind of doing all kinds of, running around doing all kinds of things? Do they seem genuinely concerned about the students more than getting something for themselves? Do they seem to know what they're talking about? Have they studied? Who were their teachers? How did they relate to their own teachers? And in what context did they study? Like, what's the history of their kind of education and learning? What retreats have they done? Those kind of things. So and then one of the most important things is look, well, how do they affect my mind? when I'm around them, when I listen to them speak, when I see them, or when I hear their explanations, does it have a positive effect on my mind? And then another question to ask is, well, would I want to be like them? Would I want to become like they are? Because whoever we take as our teacher, our teachers, then, through that connection, and the more effort we put into that connection, the more we become like them. So in this life, in future lives, and we have to think not only in this life, but in terms of from life to life in the future, do I feel like there's someone I can trust, that that they'll lead me in a good direction, a wholesome direction from life to life, and would I like to become like them? And then it's also helpful to look at their senior students. Who are the people who've been their students for a while already? For 5 years, 10 years, 20, many years. Who are the people who are their closest students, and what are those people like? Would I like to become like that? You look at all those things. So here, Pabongker Rinpoche says, at least, because it's difficult to find a teacher. Yeah. So he says, like Tsongkhapa says, well, first of all, Tsongkhapa says, at least someone who has some experience of the 3 higher trainings, and they have a correct understanding of they've realized emptiness, they have love, yeah, and they have a loving heart. So if you have those 5 qualities, look for someone who has those 5 qualities. If you can't find someone who has all 10 qualities, at least someone who has those 5. They have some experience in their continuum of the higher training in ethical discipline, concentration, and emptiness, correct view. And then they've realized emptiness. And then they have loving affection, right? And compassion. They have a loving heart. And then Pabongker Rinpoche adds to that. He says, at least someone, mata. So the very least, from within like Dharma activities and world activities, they mainly engage in Dharma activities. And then, and then from within, aspiring for the happiness of this life and future lives, they're mainly interested in happiness of future lives. And then within concern for self and others, they mainly have concern for others. And then they're not careless with their 3 doors. It means their body, with their actions of body, speech, and mind, they're not careless. They've abandoned carelessness. And then they don't lead the disciples on a wrong path. But the problem with that last one, they don't lead disciples on a wrong path, is like, well, we're the ones trying to learn about what the path is. So how can we distinguish like a right path from a wrong path? But your common sense can take you a long ways. See, what leads you, what seems just like something that's wholesome and good, versus something that seems kind of confusing and maybe not good for me. So you just use your common sense. Okay, so those are the qualities of a teacher. And then, point out here we don't really have time to go through, but there's the benefits of correctly relying upon, and the drawbacks of not relying upon a teacher. So some of here from Pabongker Rinpoche's outlines, from the outlines for liberation in the palm of your hand. He says, if you correctly rely upon a teacher, then you will come closer to Buddhahood. And then it pleases all the Buddhas. And then you will not be disturbed by demons or bad company, so malevolent influences. By spirits, you won't have spirit harm or other kind of non-virtuous friends won't affect you. You will automatically put a stop to all delusions and misdeeds. So anger and attachment, those afflictive emotions will reduce by that connection. Your insights and realizations into the levels of the path will increase. You will not be deprived of spiritual friends in all your future rebirths. So that's a very important one. And your future rebirths, if you correctly relate to a teacher, then in future rebirths, you create the causes to meet the teachers again, 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 and again, which is very important. You will not fall into the lower realms. So when you die, you won't take a lower rebirth, you take a good rebirth. And you will effortlessly achieve all short and long-term aims. So, I mean, effortlessly is a bit of exaggeration, but relative to not, not correctly relying upon a teacher with relatively very little effort, you achieve realizations of the path and enlightenment. And then the disadvantages of not relying on a spiritual teacher or incorrectly relying upon are just the opposite. Like if you disparage, so it means like if you disparage your teacher or insult them. Then if you disparage your guru, you insult all the victorious ones, all the Buddhas. Because the idea is that your teacher is a representative and kind of a vehicle through which all the Buddhas are guiding us, right? That's really when we rely upon a teacher in thought, the view we need to generate is that, this teacher of mine is actually an embodiment of all the Buddhas. All enlightened beings are guiding me in this form of this teacher. And so when we see them with respect and treat them with respect and follow their advice and make offerings and see them in a wholesome way, like all the Buddhas are pleased with us, and we receive so much blessing, and it's like being guided by Shakyamuni Buddha himself. There's really no difference except that we don't have the karma to see this very pure form of a being like Shakyamuni Buddha. We only have the Buddhas appear to us in very ordinary forms because that's what fits our karma. If they appear to us in a very pure form, like Tara or Medicine Buddha or Chenrezig or something, we wouldn't be able to see them. We only have the karma to see very ordinary things. So the Buddhas appear. And this is one of the main reasonings to establish that our own teacher is a Buddha or is a kind of emanation of the Buddhas guiding me in this way. Is that definitely imagine if we sincerely practice the path and become and mainly meditate on compassion, we genuinely have like this compassionate wish to seeing every sentient being as precious and dear as our very own child or whoever's closest to us, and we care for each sentient being kind of infinitely selflessly in that way. And then for many, many lives, we practice in order to be of the greatest benefit to sentient beings, such that that's who we are as a person. Then, and then we become enlightened. The continuum doesn't cease. Our mental continuum carries on, and we have this infinite ability to work to benefit sentient beings. So would we? Of course we would, naturally. So all countless enlightened beings, people who have been enlightened in the past, of course they exist now, and they're continually working to benefit sentient beings. So then the question is, well, where are they, right? We can't see, but it's not like they wear a special hat with flashing lights that says, "I'm a Buddha working to benefit sentient beings," right? They appear according to our karma, which means they appear in very ordinary ways. But then we look to see, well, who are the people that are actually leading me to liberation from samsara and enlightenment? It's my Dharma teachers, no? It's like His Holiness and my teachers in the monastery, for me, because I studied in the monastery so much, teachers at the centers. It's our own Dharma teachers, right? They're the ones that are kind of leading us to enlightenment. So the conclusion is like, well, it's kind of like this. Like, if the Buddhas they actually want to lead all sentient beings to enlightenment, then of course they're going to be teaching the Dharma, right? So then if they're teaching the Dharma, how do they appear? They just appear as ordinary beings teaching the Dharma. Ordinary beings means totally ordinary. Means they look like they make mistakes. They sometimes, although they teach Dharma, they get sick. Sometimes they smell bad. Sometimes they're grumpy. Sometimes, sometimes they say rude things and make mistakes, but that's what it means to be ordinary. Like I remember very clearly, Lama Tsongkhpa Rinpoche made this point so much. Of all my teachers, Lama Tsongkhpa Rinpoche is the one to speak about guru devotion the most. No other teacher speaks about so much. But why is that? Because clearly Rinpoche in his own spiritual development, he saw how essential that is to see your teachers in a pure way, thereby you receive blessing, and thereby you quickly generate realizations. Like one story Rinpoche would tell to kind of illustrate that was once when he must have been in his 20s, probably his late 20s, maybe early 30s, when he used to spend a lot of time at Tushita Meditation Center in Dharamsala. And once there was Tushita even now has a lot of flowers around. It's kind of tradition there. And so once there was an especially beautiful flower, I don't know if I can remember the name, but it's one of these flowers that become really big with like lots and lots and lots of little petals all organized. What? Dahlia, maybe Dahlia, yeah, but definitely like Dahlia. But there was this one really big, beautiful flower at Tushita, and Lama Tsongkhpa thought, oh, I want to offer this to His Holiness. No, so he put it in a nice pot or wrapped the pot with a nice piece of cloth, and then took down to His Holiness' office and gave it to the security there and said, please offer this to His Holiness. Tell him it's from me. And so, Rinpoche then offered, and then he came back to Tushita, and then he said, I think it was like the next morning, he was meditating on the suffering of the lower realms, and he was just overcome by the suffering of like the hell beings, such that as if he could feel it himself, such that he was crying and then he was, and based on that, then he was overcome with incredible compassion, thinking, oh, I really want to go, to the hells to help the hell beings, such that he was crying for 2 or 3 days. He was just deeply overcome with compassion. And Rinpoche doesn't connect the two directly, but what he's alluding to is that he thinks it's by the blessing of having made that offering to His Holiness that his mind was able to change in a dramatic way, like very, very quickly like that. Yeah. So and it's because Lama Zopa Rinpoche personally had this experience of, seeing that if you really, with faith, you relate in a pure way to your teachers, then it's like you open your mind to their blessing, and the mind can quickly develop like on the path. And that's essential. Without that, Rinpoche would say your mind is like a desert. Things don't grow. If you have faith and you see your teachers in a pure way, then it's like their blessing. Like Demolotra Rinpoche described like this once to me in Bangalore, when we were staying in Bangalore. That a guru is like the snow mountain, and our faith is like the sun. So the stronger our faith is, the more brightly the sun shines on the snow mountain, and the snow melts, and then the water flows down to the river. Flows down to the valley and nourishes the crops, right? So our faith is like the sun. The guru is like the snow mountain. The stronger our faith is, then the more water flows down to the river of our minds and helps qualities grow in our mind. So it's like that. Yeah. So Rinpoche would use this kind of logic, like if you say, because the problem comes because, I'll stop sharing now. Sorry. The problem comes because, we do see faults in our teachers, because our teachers often do things that we're just like, what is that? No, not teachers like His Holiness is, I think, among my own teachers, he's the easiest to see as a Buddha. He's so perfect. It's like everything he does is just so perfect. It's very easy to see His Holiness as a Buddha. Lama Zopa Rinpoche also. Although Rinpoche, when I first heard recordings of Rinpoche teaching, I just couldn't listen. And the first couple of years I listened to him teaching, I just didn't understand much and have a lot of doubts. Like, why? What is he doing? Like, what is he going on about this story and that story? And then half the time you don't know, like, what is he talking about? So it's difficult. And then other teachers in the monastery, every teacher, most teachers, there's just some things that make it difficult for us to see them in a pure way. But then Rinpoche would use the logic, Lama Zopa Rinpoche would say, like, what if it's like, if we look at all of the teachers who are teaching us Dharma, and we conclude that none of them are Buddhas, then where are the Buddhas? What are the Buddhas doing to benefit sentient beings? Where are the Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas, who can emanate countless forms benefiting sentient beings? Like, where are they? What are they doing? Then we have to conclude that, basically there actually are no Buddhas. Enlightenment is impossible. There are no Bodhisattvas. And so enlightenment is impossible, basically. So it comes to that, So Yeah. But then there's another doubt arises for, because, well, it's a bit like in Tantra. Like one of the main practices in Tantra is deity yoga, where you imagine dissolving all of your impure aggregates, your body and mind, into emptiness, and then you just have this pure mind, realizing emptiness or imagining, to whatever degree of understanding of dependent arising emptiness you have. You focus on that combined with the motivation of bodhicitta, great compassion, and you imagine kind of that's all you are. It's just this completely pure mind, compelled by great compassion, motivated by great compassion, realizing emptiness, according to whatever understanding. And then that mind, you imagine, arises in the form of a deity, and then you do all different kinds of practices from within, that identification of oneself as an enlightened being, as a deity who's an enlightened being, right? But the problem is when you're doing that kind of tantric practice, like in the back of your mind, you're like, but my leg hurts and I'm hungry and I'm wondering when this session is going to be over. And like, you're not a Buddha. Part of your mind, you're trying to imagine you're a Buddha, but another part of your mind, you're like, but I know I'm not. No. So like, what do you do? No. Well, the more you can just leave aside that I know I'm not, which is true. I mean, if you ask genuinely, am I really a Buddha? No, I'm not. You don't know. I'm just imagining I'm a Buddha because that's the quickest way to actually become a Buddha, right? And so, in one way, with regard to our Dharma teachers, if we, put this whole practice of guru devotion aside and just objectively ask, like sometimes we debate this on the debate courtyard, and it's very difficult to answer. Like if you really just, like if we really ask or someone asks us, are they really a Buddha? Well, honestly, like we don't know. Because if you're not a Buddha, you can't know who else is a Buddha. It's like if you're not an expert like neurosurgeon, you don't know who else is a good neurosurgeon or not. You just, because you don't have that level of skill yourself, you can't assess other people's level of, if you don't have that level of realization yourself, you can't assess another person's level of realization. So honestly, like if we look at, our own teachers, are they Buddha? Like, actually, we can't know, right? But the more we can generate the view that they are, the more benefit there is to us, right? If they're a good teacher, right? If they're, of course, if they're a wrong teacher, like if there's someone who's going to mislead us, then, and this is why you have to be so careful checking before you generate this discrimination that I'm going to take that person as my teacher, or before you take vows, before you take initiations, or before you take oral transmissions from someone. Before you, in short, before you create a Dharma connection with someone, primarily by thinking, now they're my teacher, you need to check carefully about that person, whether they're really a qualified teacher or not. And only then, when you're quite sure they are, and according to all the different ways I just described earlier, then you create that connection. But once you create that connection as a Dharma teacher, then you put aside all these, the minds that's finding reasons why they're not a Buddha. The more you can see them as a Buddha, then you receive, whether they are a Buddha or not, it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. You're not seeing them as a Buddha because that's definitely what the reality is. And you know that. You can't know that, right? Whether they're a Buddha or not. But the more you can see them in a positive way, the more benefit you receive. If you see them as a Buddha, then the effect on you is the same as if they really are a Buddha, irregardless of what they are, right? So, yeah. Yeah. And what that indicates in a way is that even if the teacher, does a lot of, or acts in a lot of very ordinary ways that we kind of think like a Buddha wouldn't do that. No, that even if, the teacher acts in a lot of ways we find completely uninspiring, but that doesn't mean, if they are a Buddha, it could be the case that they're just appearing in that way because that's what fits our karma. It's due to our karmic obscurations that they have to appear in that way. That's the only way they can appear. Even if they're not a Buddha, if we just leave that aside because one of the important aspects of generating this correctly relying upon the teacher in thought is realizing that the way things appear to us is not the way things are. The way things appear to us is so much shaped by our own karma, our own biases, our own obscurations, our own kind of way of distorting things, right? So we can't just believe whatever we see, the way it appears to us. But also that even if the person's not a Buddha, that still, are they benefiting me in some way, in a Dharma way? And then that benefit, that whatever they're doing to, be a role model in certain ways, explain things to me in certain ways, help me with different practices, give me advice, Dharma advice. So in whatever way, in terms of Dharma, they're benefiting me. That is the action of the Buddhas. We can think that's the action of the Buddhas for sure. No, otherwise, what are the Buddhas doing? No, how are they benefiting me? Even if all the other things we do, it's difficult to see, identify and focus on the things that do benefit me. And we can think that's the action of the Buddhas, and then use that as a basis to generate kind of faith. But yeah. But in conclusion, it is something you have to be really careful about, because when we generate that kind of pure view and faith in especially in a teacher, like it's a very powerful thing. It can be very, if they really are qualified and have a genuine altruistic aspiration, a pure wish to benefit us and to benefit others, then the teacher can use. We're kind of investing that teacher with a lot of trust. We're putting a lot of trust in them, which puts them in a very powerful kind of position. So if they use that well, it can be very beneficial to us and beneficial to others. But it is the case. You look at the history of Buddhism just in the West, just in the last 20 years, not to mention since, Buddhism first started coming to like America. When I was, because I studied Buddhism a little bit in college, and I took a class in Zen Buddhism. But part of the class was all these scandals, of Zen Buddhist teachers from like the 60s, sleeping with their students and mainly that, sleeping with the students, and then, using their students to just hoard wealth and have this kind of extravagant lifestyle and things like that. Not to mention other kind of ethical breaches. But, so it's really unfortunate when that happens. And it's really, really painful and damaging to the students, especially. So that's why it's very important to check teacher before you create a connection. Yeah. And that's one thing I feel quite good about FPMT as an organization. As an organization, it's not without its own problems, like there have been problems in the past, but overall, as an organization, they have very high standards of ethical conduct. Teachers all have to sign ethical policy. There's a protecting from abuse policy. And there's quite, and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Lama Geshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche himself were peerless examples of pure morality. And so, yeah, I feel quite, you can be quite confident most teachers who are certified in FPMT, like they're trustworthy, basically. Yeah, okay, we should stop for a break now. Let's take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back.
I don't think I have a question, just like a comment.
Oh, we cannot hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, now we can hear you.
So I don't think it's so much a question, just as a comment, that I find that this to be super challenging. And I don't know, I think of it kind of as a collision between like Eastern culture and Western culture. I don't know if that's fair, but there's something about the way that we're raised and the way we think about, I don't know, teachers, devotion, subservience, I don't know, all these sort of different elements that gets really complicated. And it might just be me making it more complicated in my mind, and kind of like a resistance that I have. But just a comment that it's interesting this has been interesting this morning and yesterday, because it's definitely something that feels very, I don't know, challenging, difficult, complicated for
Yeah,
me.
no, I'm glad you mentioned that or say that. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's true when you look at, I mean, it's a huge, like you don't really find anything like that in Western culture. I think it is very different thing in Eastern culture. And it's some, I mean, it's something that's very part of Eastern culture. Like it's
Yeah.
like you just, you know, like just being in India, you travel around India, you say that you see the way ordinary Indians relate to the teachers. Even, you know, like I taught, I mean, yeah, I mean, I taught English in Taiwan for a year as an English teacher. Even just as an English teacher teaching in Taiwan, I found people are so much more respectful.
Yeah.
Even like I wasn't even certified, like not even certified teacher. I'm just American guy shows up in Taiwan and like teaches people's kids English, and they have just, it's part of the culture to have so much respect for teachers. You know, their
Yeah.
teacher is like a really kind of, you have a high status in society, you get paid much better, you get paid quite well. And the whole idea they hold, I mean, I think that's kind of the, in Chinese culture, it's that Confucian, is part of the Confucian kind of element in Chinese culture is you really hold teachers in high regard. In India, it's more ancient than that. I mean, it's the Hindu culture, but the spiritual teacher is held in high regard because it's kind of like, the idea is kind of like they hold the keys to, you know, your future happiness and good fortune. Whereas in the West, I mean, you look back at like ancient Greeks, like, yeah, it seemed like in ancient Greece, like Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, like you look in the Platonic dialogues with the way people, yeah, the Socrates, like his students held him in quite regard, but not, they don't see him as a god. And then, you know, the politicians, you know, sentence him to death, right? Because they didn't like the political challenge or yeah, they felt like he was challenging their power. Um, but then in Christianity, it's kind of heretical to look at a teacher as
Yeah.
something, because only God is the all supreme, and teachers are just kind of a conduit to a way to connect to God through the priest and the bishops. I mean, of course, like in the Catholic Church, yeah, the priests have a high status, but then, I mean, of course, that's been just made a disaster of in the last, I mean, half century with all the scandals. So, and then, yeah, I mean, also in the Protestant church, it's just, and the Protestant church is very different, I think, because the whole Protestant reform movement was about eliminating the clergy as like a vehicle between the ordinary people and God, because there was so much corruption there, so much, and so making it possible for people just to relate to God in a personal, direct way in their own way, right? And so there's really kind of elimination of the teacher as having a special high status. No, the teacher is just supposed to be another ordinary person, kind of like you, that's just, I don't know, somehow more inspired or something. So yeah, it's a very different thing in Eastern culture. And that the problem that you, I mean, the fact that you find it difficult should be, or any of us find it difficult, should be no surprise. Like, but I think the most, I mean, to me, what I think, well, I mean, in my own experience as being someone from the West who was new to Buddhism, you know, at one point, and struggling with the whole idea of guru devotion. And that's why I mentioned it was this one thing that this one, when I was a very new monk, an older monk, just mentioned to me that his Sakya teacher told him, like, you know, if you have problems seeing your teacher in a pure way, like think eventually you have to see yourself and all sentient beings in a pure way. So who do you start with? You know, to practice, learn how to do that, start with the person who's teaching you, right? And that is really is, I mean, because that's also different. That's also not in Western culture. Like in Western, especially Christian culture, there's not this idea that we have the potential to be perfect, to be as perfect as a Buddha, right? That would be, like I was saying yesterday, that would be kind of heretical to think that. But that's very much part of Buddhism, right? If not Eastern culture, largely Buddhism. So it's like, yeah, the idea is that if, as long as we grasp onto faults in ourselves, we remain flawed, right? As long as we identify with all the faulty things that we see in ourselves, then we cling on to that and we hold on to that and we never get beyond those. And the same with other people, as long as the way we regard with other people, by always identifying them with their flaws, and then we never, it's like we never kind of really help them get beyond those, just like we don't help ourselves. So it's this kind of radical optimism in a way, where you look for the positive potential in others and identify with them, and you do the same with yourself. And so the Guru devotion is like a practice of that. Yeah. But there's a lot of, I mean, but you have to have a healthy dose of common sense and caution together with it, because, yeah, there are all these issues of the possibility of misusing that. But it's not, you mentioned subservience, the idea of subservience. It's not an idea, I mean, that does some kind of seem to be there, like entailed in it, that you put this teacher up very high and you see yourself as very low. But that's not, I mean, I know that it can feel like that, but that's, it's never taught like that's what you're trying to create, or that's what it's supposed to be. Like I mean, the teacher should be putting the students before themselves, no? So each of us, I mean, trying to generate altruism, we always try to see all others as like more important than us, and us as like servant of other sentient beings in a healthy way, right? And so the teacher should be doing themselves. I mean, all of my teachers, I can say, like, they don't, although I mean, they might be famous, many people respect them, many people put them up on a pedestal, they themselves are always putting themselves down and being very humble and very low. Just like His Holiness Dalai Lama. I mean, he's always being very humble, humbling himself and considering others as more important than himself. So any good teacher should be like that. But so there is a danger, but a good teacher, like, it doesn't go to their head, no? But yeah, it's fraught with different dangers. There's no question. And naturally, it's uncomfortable coming from Western background. Yeah.
A Tibetan friend talked about how like it's his, like I guess it's kind of his two root teachers. He talked about one being sort of like a, I don't know, maternal, and one being sort of paternal, and they were family for him, right? But and they're amazing humans. But I think I use that word subservience because I feel like I see more of that dynamic, or people falling into that dynamic or thinking it's the right dynamic in the West, whereas that's not something at all that I saw or experienced in the East.
Yeah, it's true. You see that there's this kind of Shangri-La like mentality where you tend to see like Tibetans or something. I mean, any Tibetan, or especially Tibetan teachers, there's some kind of mystical aura, and they have these superpowers, and they can do this and do that, and we really sort of put them up on a pedestal. Whereas among Tibetans, you don't see that nearly as much. They're much more just kind of grounded, down to earth, relate to their teachers, yes, with respect. Yes, they see them in a very wholesome way, but not like put them up on this kind of incredible pedestal. Yeah. Yeah. Bei, you have a question?
I do have a question.
Then we come back to Teresa.
Oh, okay. Kind of maybe two-pronged questions. One, what they're all related to the fact that this is the preliminary topics for the Lamrim. So for a Westerner or someone who's not from the culture that you mentioned, it seems like there's a lot of assumption about the fact that the Buddha exists, the fact that the Buddha has all of these enlightened qualities within the reasoning of the Guru devotion. And if we look, as you explained, the refuge in the three jewels and explanation of the qualities of the Buddha actually comes later in the first scope. So that's one for me. And I guess related to that it's
what was the question? Like, why or how does that work? Kind of.
I think the question is, does it even make sense for someone fairly new without having the understanding of the qualities of the Buddha to use this type of reasonings? Because really make
Yeah.
sense.
No,
There's no faith
it does.
in the Buddha.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and
That's
I
right.
guess
Yeah.
I've heard that Lama Tsongkhpa Rinpoche even recommended the Discovering Buddhism topic of spiritual teachers being taught later in
Yeah.
the order,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it
Um,
is, I think. We usually teach it. When we
yes.
taught it when Namjong and Venerable Namjong and I taught it for OCBC, we taught it like one of the last modules.
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, even this round,
Yeah.
we
No,
had
this
just finished.
this way of organizing presenting Buddhist teachings is not for people who are new to Buddhism. Like it's for people who are Buddhist already, right? The Lam Rim, I mean, think when Atisha came to Tibet to teach the Lam Rim, he's teaching that to people who are Buddhist already, not to people who are new to Buddhism. So it's true. I mean, His Holiness Dalai Lama also says when you teach Buddhism to people who are new to Buddhism, you don't teach, you teach things like about the nature of the mind. And then His Holiness recommends about dependent arising and emptiness, karma, the law of cause and effect. Compassion, morality, compassion, those kind of things first. And then gradually, like, what is a Buddha? Yeah. His Holiness recommends the two truths. Teach the two truths first, then the Four Noble Truths, and then the Three Jewels of Refuge. And then Guru devotion would only come even after that. So yeah, but the reason I'm teaching now is because that's what comes first in the prayer, and this is supposed to be kind of an advanced. This is not for intro for new people. This weekend retreat.
Okay, yes, that makes sense.
But it's true. Everything you said is right.
Okay. And I guess just from observing that now it's like the topic of Buddha nature is kind of popular. And I'm guessing that maybe one is we are a little bit self-centered. So it's easy to see like, oh yeah, we
Yeah.
have Buddha nature.
Yeah,
But maybe it seems like an easier start that we all have this Buddha nature and then understand what the Buddha nature is and then understand that all beings have that Buddha nature as a start.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Was that your second question?
Well,
Your second comment.
that it's not a comment. It's more like a question. Does it make sense at all? Like to look at it that way. Is that?
Yeah.
Do you think?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Because in talking about Guru devotion, yeah, so much of it is about seeing someone as a Buddha. So if you have no idea what Buddha is or have no faith that that actually exists, then it doesn't make sense. Yeah. Yeah. What about Guru devotion? Buddha nature? Yeah. It makes sense to teach Buddha nature. Usually we teach it together with the mind at the beginning, the nature of the mind.
Okay. So that would be something like a preliminary of the preliminary topic.
Yeah. You see, I'll show you. Look in like Annie Karen's outlines. I was going to use that a bit for this retreat. Here, look at Annie Karen's outlines. We'll just look at the table of contents. See, because I was actually looking there for the list of the qualities of a teacher, and she doesn't even Guru devotion's not even in the whole thing. Preliminaries, visualization of Shakyamuni Buddha, then the small scope, beginningless mind is the first thing, right? Preliminary, just visualization of Shakyamuni, then beginningless mind, and then perfect human rebirth, 8 mundane concerns, impermanence and death, suffering of lower realms, taking refuge, karma, 4 noble truths, true suffering, cause of suffering, 12 branches of dependent arising, and then the great scope, equanimity, bodhicitta, then a lot about bodhicitta, calm abiding, emptiness. No Guru devotion at all. This is what she uses for like the 10-day intro to Buddhism course at Kopan. Yeah, and that's typical for the way you would, like the 10-day, intro course at Tushita. Yeah, mostly you don't teach Guru devotion because for new people it's not helpful. It's only helpful for people who actually they want to kind of seriously pursue like Buddhist practice. Then it becomes very important, like finding a teacher, but not like you have to have right away. It's just gradually you need to make connection with a teacher and practice. Yeah. Okay. Teresa?
Thank you so much for I'm trying not to cry. It's very moving to me how you teach about this topic. It's very moving. And I think for me, it is astounding how many people have come into my life that have all of those qualities that you listed. It just blows my mind, actually. And that I have been fortunate enough to give all of my faith and trust to somebody who has never abused his power with me. It's not to say he never will, maybe he will, I don't know, but he hasn't. And so for me, this topic of guru devotion, because it has stretched my mind so tremendously, I just couldn't imagine that this was possible. I think for me anyway, it makes sense that it would come first, that it's the most important for me in my life right now, and that everything else comes after that. Anyway, thank you
But you
again
think,
for
I
all
mean,
your
but
teachings.
you've been involved with Buddhism quite a long time, Teresa, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So do you think when you were, I mean, imagine back when you were new to Buddhism, would you have found it helpful to hear about this like right at the beginning?
Well, I did hear about it right in the beginning and I thought it was a bunch of bullshit. I really did.
Oh, see?
So I don't know, was it helpful? I stuck around. I didn't leave.
You
So
did, but I don't know. If you take 100 people who think something's a bunch of bullshit, then probably a big percentage are not going to stick around.
No, I do think that I think it's true that it's probably better to wait until somebody has more experience to talk about this topic.
Yeah.
And it moves me very, very deeply now, and it definitely did before. It moves me
Oh,
very
good.
deeply now. Yeah.
Good, good, good. Excellent. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Let's turn to the next topic then, and the next verse in the foundation of all good qualities. So Tsongkhapa says, understanding that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once is difficult to find again and is greatly meaningful. Please bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly, day and night, takes its essence. So here again, I mean, you see the very second topic, and I mean, in the Lam Rim is considering a precious human rebirth. So this requires belief in past and future lives, right? So people who are new to Buddhism, many, they won't even be, they won't believe in past and future lives, or is not sure, won't be sure about that. So that's another reason to teach about the mind first, because then it becomes a basis for establishing not only Buddha nature, but also the existence of past and future lives. Yeah. So here, understanding that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once. Okay, so first of all, what is the precious freedom of this rebirth? What is he talking about, this precious human rebirth? And to just list that, I'll jump again to Pabonko's outlines. This is the outlines of liberation in the palm of your hand. And so he lists very nicely. Oh yeah, here we go. Oh, it's actually, he doesn't list here. I'll jump to Annie Karen's outlines. I'm sure she lists page 9. It's good to have a list of because there's the 8 freedoms and the 10 richnesses. This is also to new people, you don't give a lot of lists. No, to scare them away. Guys, beginningless mind. There we go. Precious human rebirth. This is where I read the quote from. So the 8 leisures. There we go. The freedom, so there's freedom, so there's 8 leisures means, or 8 freedoms means there's freedom from states in which it would be very difficult to practice Dharma in that state. For example, if we took rebirth in as a hell being, it'd be almost impossible to practice Dharma in that state. And then the 8 endowments are 8, so the 10 endowments. The 10 endowments are 8 sort of instances of good fortune that provide a basis so that we're able to practice Dharma. So there's 5 related to ourselves and 5 related to others. So these together sort of constitute what is like defines a precious human rebirth. So freedom from being born in the hell realms, right? So then you have to imagine, well, what it'd be like to be born in a hell realm. And again, to do that, you have to believe the hell realms exist and already know something about them. So also you see these topics of the Lamrim, none of them, you can't understand any of them in isolation from all the others. Like the more you learn about the others, the more the one you know about the other. You know, they're like sometimes described like the fibers in a woven mat. You know, they each are connected and affect the other. So you pull one and you pull one, you know, fiber in a mat and in like a straw mat, you know, one of the strands of straw, and it pulls the other. So they all kind of related to each other. So like this, freedom of being born in the hell realms, freedom from being born as a hungry ghost. So freedom from being born in the animal realm, freedom from being born as a long life God. So those are 4 states of like unleisure we would have in different rebirths. And then the other 4 are all related to human rebirth. So to meditate on that, you think about, you know, reflect on, well, what it would be like in a hell realm, to be reborn as a hell realm. Is that actually possible? And if it is, what would it be like to be reborn there? And would I be able to practice Dharma in that kind of rebirth? Or and the same with an animal, so forth. You can see how any of those rebirths, it would be basically impossible to make progress on a spiritual path, almost impossible. And then 5, freedom from being born at a time when the founder Buddha has not appeared. So a founder Buddha means a Buddha who's come into a world system where no Buddhism doesn't exist, and then newly teaches the Dharma, and then it exists for a period of time. So if we're born at a time when, you know, like imagine we'd been born, you know, 200 years before Shakyamuni Buddha, then we wouldn't have been able to meet the Buddha's teachings. So it's like that, being born at a time when Buddha's teachings don't exist in the world because no founder Buddha has appeared. And then freedom from being born in a place with no Dharma, right? So we could be born in a place, you know, some area, some country where there's just Buddhism is just totally unknown, and we're, you know, born and live and die without ever having met Dharma. And here Dharma means essentially like a way to reduce and eliminate the afflictive emotions on one hand, a method to ensure a good rebirth on the other hand, a method to come closer to and achieve liberation from samsara, nirvana, and then finally to achieve full enlightenment. So all of those things. And then freedom from being born with defective senses. So this applied much more in the past. These days it doesn't apply so much, even because there's so many, you know, so many more methods and ways and technology to help those who have, you know, different disabilities. But especially in the past, if you were deaf or mute or blind, then it's very, very, not impossible, but much more difficult to practice Dharma. Think about like Helen Keller, like just before Helen Keller's time and before Braille, the way people treated those who were deaf, mute, blind was quite abominable. And so people really had very little access to education and so forth, not to mention Dharma. And then freedom from holding wrong views. So this is where you just have very heavy wrong views that prevent you from ever having interest in or opening your mind and heart to Dharma, right? Yeah, so that's the 8 freedoms, and then there's the 10 endowments. Being born, so these are the things that we have. You know, if we have a precious human rebirth, then we have all or most of these, and that's what makes it possible for us to be able to practice Dharma and practice Buddhism in this life. That we're born as a human being, born in the center of a religious country, or born in a country where we have access to religious teachings, being born with a well-functioning body and mind, so having complete sense faculties, our mind not being, and body not being deeply, restricted by some kind of physical or mental disability, not having committed any of the 5 heinous crimes. 5 heinous crimes are having killed your mother, deliberately killed your mother, killed your father, killed an arhat, maliciously drawn blood from a Buddha, and created a schism in the Sangha. So if you've committed any of those, then it's like this very intense negative thing you've done. Like imagine you deliberately killed your mother or father, like such that your mind is very obscured. It's almost impossible to practice Dharma in that state. Having faith in the Dharma. So we have some faith in the Dharma, and that opens our mind to practicing. And then we have, so those are all in relation to oneself, right? You personally, we have each of those 5 endowments. And then there are 5 circumstantial endowments. That means they're related to others. 5 things conditions, supportive conditions we have related to others. Being born in a fortunate period when a Buddha has appeared. So Shakyamuni Buddha appeared in the world system, and yeah, he's still remembered. His teaching is still remembered. Being born in a fortunate period when a Buddha has taught the Dharma. So not only a Buddha appeared, but the Buddha taught the Dharma, and it became well known and widespread. Being born in a fortunate period when the Dharma exists and flourishes. So it's not only the Buddha appeared and taught the Dharma, but it still exists now and flourishes. After another 2,500 years or 3,000 years, it won't exist anymore in the world. And then being born in a fortunate period when we are able to meet with the pure followers of the Buddha's teachings. So we're able to meet with, other, brothers and sisters in the Dharma kind of practice from whom we can learn. And then being born in a fortunate period when practitioners can enjoy kind support. So those who practice the Dharma, especially monks and nuns, but in general, also there's kind people. There's people who are sympathetic to that and supportive of that, and give them material and spiritual support in those ways. Yeah. So those are when Tsongkhapa says, go back to foundation of all good qualities. Understanding the precious freedom of this rebirth is found. So that's what he's talking about. He says the precious freedom. He means the 8 freedoms, and then indirectly the 10 endowments as well. The precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once. So that it's found only once and is difficult, and then the next line, is difficult to find again and is greatly meaningful. Right? So it's found only once, it's difficult to find again, and it's greatly meaningful. So it's found only once, meaning this kind of state we're in, where we have a healthy body, healthy mind, we've met Dharma, have some faith and interest, and our ability to practice, it's something that's extremely difficult to find. Finding it it's found only once means it's like almost impossible to find. And it's very difficult to find in terms of the causes, in terms of the entity, and then in terms of number and in terms of analogy. There's 4 different ways. There's probably no time to go through all of them. But the main thing is, think about first of all, we have to be born as a human. What are the main causes to take rebirth as a human, right? The main one is practicing pure morality, like not harming others. So you can see, you ask, well, look at the animals. Like, as an animal, can an animal take rebirth as a human? In general, yes. But if you're born as a bird that eats insects, then good luck. No, because you can't practice pure morality. I mean, your instinct is to kill. Or cats, even there's a cat like Oreo, the cat at Vajrapani Institute. He was hunting the lizards. There's a lot of lizards around. Even though he has all the food he needs, they give him cat food every day. But it's his instinct, it's a cat's instinct to hunt and kill. So then how do you practice? You can't really practice being honest, because you can hardly speak as an animal. So to practice not killing is difficult. To practice not stealing, difficult, because if there's some food you like, you'll take it, right? And then, so how do you practice pure morality? So how do you acquire, the causes to take rebirth as a human? Very, very difficult. Just as an animal, not to mention a hungry ghost, a hell being even more difficult. So, and then even among humans, it's difficult, to practice pure morality. Among humans, I don't know if you take the sum of all the people's different actions of body, speech, and mind, how many of them are, according to pure morality, and how many of them are breaking, morality? It's not sure. Anyway, so it's difficult to create the causes. And then the Buddhist teachings rarely appear in the world, right? It's not like they're always available. So it's very difficult to meet the Buddhist teachings. And then even among, we can see, even among those who have a human rebirth and exist at a time when the Buddhist teachings exist, those who take interest are very few. No. And so why do we, but the question comes, well, why is the Buddhist teaching so important? I mean, in a way, just to be a good person, it's not important to be Buddhist. Just to have an ethical, a moral life, to have a happy life, it's not essential to be Buddhist at all. I mean, there's countless people who are very good, kind-hearted, good people, lead an ethical, moral life, and will definitely take, good rebirth, who are not Buddhist, who have nothing to do with Buddhism. But if you look to the higher goals of liberation from samsara and full enlightenment, Buddhism becomes more and more important, right? One reason, His Holiness promoting secular ethics and promoting, universal compassion, practice of compassion for all beings, irregardless of spiritual beliefs, is because he knows, most people, they won't take any interest in Buddhism, and they don't especially need Buddhism to have a happy life, have a good rebirth, to stop harming others and use your life to benefit others. You don't need any religion, or within those, you don't need Buddhism. But then to achieve liberation from samsara, to bring an end to this process of taking rebirth and dying and taking rebirth again and again through the force of karma, you need a clear understanding of what are the causes, the fundamental causes of that. And within, Buddhism gives the clearest explanation of that and the clearest methods to bring an end to that. And then enlightenment, of course, is something that only, Buddhism speaks about, and only Buddhism explains clearly like what it is. So it's not to be biased and say, none of the other religions are worth a dime and only Buddhism is. Not like that. Each of the religions are world religions, and they each contribute to the well-being to the welfare of people in this life, also help to achieve a future life, also can help to come closer to liberation and enlightenment just by becoming a better and better person. Practicing morality, generating good concentration and so forth. But without a clear explanation of exactly what keeps us trapped in samsara and what are the antidotes that will free us from samsara, and then exactly what enlightenment is and how to accumulate the causes to achieve that, then it's impossible to achieve those things, right? So then, oops. Sorry, this is the wrong thing. Yeah, so freedom and rebirth is difficult. So understanding that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once is difficult to find and is greatly meaningful. Yeah, it's greatly meaningful because, with this precious human rebirth, we can accumulate the causes for a good future rebirth, and we can come closer to liberation from samsara and closer to full enlightenment, right? So we can use in a very meaningful way for ourselves and beneficial to others. So seeing this, please bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly, day and night, takes its essence. So seeing this incredible fortune and opportunity I have in this rebirth, then we pray, please make me to make the most of this opportunity to take its essence, right, by practicing Dharma. And then that's combined with the next verse of contemplation on death, right? So we might think, oh yes, it's excellent. I'm so happy I've taken this good rebirth and I've met the Buddhist teachings. But I'm young now, so I want to enjoy the things I can enjoy while I'm young, and then I'll wait till I'm old and then practice Dharma. So then the next contemplation on impermanence and death is to remind us that death, this opportunity to create causes for the future, the happiness and well-being of ourselves and others in the future, like now and in the future, is limited. Like it will only last for, it's only finite. It will only last for, at the maximum, like 100 years or so. But it's not guaranteed, and then we die, And then at the time after we die, it's not sure what's, what kind of rebirth we'll take, what's going to happen to our mental continuum at the time of death, and where will it go? What will happen to it? In that future existence, will we have opportunity to reduce causes of suffering and increase the causes of happiness or not? We can't say. So we have to make use of the opportunity now while we have that, and remind ourselves that that's the case by reflecting on death. So he says here, this life is as impermanent as a water bubble. Remember how quickly it decays and death comes. After death, just like a shadow follows the body, the results of black and white karma follow. So that's about karma. Yeah. So the first line, this life is as impermanent as a water bubble. Remember how quickly it decays and death comes. So first, death is certain to come. And then within that, it's uncertain. Why is that uncertain? One reason is because our life is impermanent, it's changing moment by moment, which means each moment we're only coming closer to death. There's never a moment when we're farther away from death in time, right? So each moment death is coming closer, and our bodies are extremely fragile, right? So our life is as impermanent as a water bubble. So think of a bubble on the surface of the water. It's like from the time it arises, it's only coming closer to popping. Every moment is closer to popping. And when it will pop is not certain because it's extremely fragile. Even the tiniest thing can make it pop. So for us, even falling from a building, eating some bad food, some of our cells mutate and we get cancer, getting in a car crash, all kinds of things. Our body is so fragile, all kinds of things can cause our death in an instant. So this life is as impermanent as a water bubble. Remember how quickly it decays and death comes. How quickly, our life is only coming closer to death. I was thinking we were talking about at lunch at Vajrapani Institute yesterday, we were talking about old growth. Someone was asking where can they see old growth trees around? And then asking, well, how old are those trees? Some of them are like, 1,000, 1,500, 1,800. Some are even 2,000 years old around here. I don't know. But like in Henry Cow State Park, you can see, some of the biggest, oldest trees, easily over 1,000 years old. Then after lunch, I was walking back to my house thinking like, wow, what would it be like to live for 1,000 years? No, you can't imagine. But relatively, our human life, even we're lucky to live for 100 years, it's like 1/10 of, an old growth tree. Like relatively, it's so short, 100 years. What happens compared to what happens, in history over 1,000 years? What happens in 100 years is like not much, So if you think in that way, like, yeah, our human life, even though one day can seem like a long time, 1 year can seem like a long time, 100 years actually it goes by like that. I mean, now I'm 52, so it's like it's kind of depressing to think most of my life is gone. It's over. I kind of feel like I'm just getting started now. I just moved to California. I'm teaching here. It's like the fun part's just beginning and it's almost over already. Yeah. So this life is as permanent as a water bubble. Remember how quickly it decays and death comes. After death, just like a shadow follows. So yeah, death comes quickly. So these two topics together, precious human rebirth, thinking how incredibly fortunate we are to have been born as a human, especially have good education, have some affluence. We're able to, we have the leisure to be able to study and have practice Dharma, something that can bring so much benefit to our lives. But this opportunity won't last forever, so we really need to make the most of it, like right now, without wasting time. I know for me, it was. Especially think about this contemplation of impermanence and death. It's one thing to meditate and think about it, and we're out of time. We need to stop for lunch break. We haven't even meditated on it, but it's, I don't know if, for me personally, it was like, because I had cancer when I was like 20, in my mid-20s in 2025. Then, there's nothing like really thinking you might die soon. I think any amount of meditation I could have is difficult to replicate the experience of actually like having the cause of death, cancer. If you don't treat it, if you don't do something about it, within a year, like it's going to kill you. And for many people, I see quite a few people who become ordained, like take Buddhist practice quite seriously. It is because they've seen death up close somehow. Even they themselves were severely ill, almost got in a, almost died somehow, or they saw someone close to them die. This contemplation on death, I'm just kind of speaking about it kind of quickly and going through different points. But if you really think deeply about it, it's quite scary, to think, I'm going to die and what's going to happen to me when I die. I'm not sure. We have an indication of the degree of control we'll have over our minds at the time of death. For a sign of that, we can look to how much control we have over our dreams. Because the process of going to sleep and then dreaming is quite similar. So for most of us, we don't really have much control over what kind of dreams arise. Sometimes they're bad and sometimes they're good. But we can see with habituation, we can get more control. So similarly but when we die, when we dream, it's like this kind of forces in our mind create this sort of appearance of an experience, but our continuum is attached to this body, this human body. And so the karma of being a human being is still predominant, right? We're not being separated from that. But when we die, it's like our mental continuum is separated from the human body because the karma we have to be in a human existence in this life has come to an end, right? And so it's really, you go into like a Wild West. It's like, then all the karmic imprints that we've accumulated in past lives, it's possible any of them could ripen. And it's not sure which one's going to ripen. So we think about all the karmas we've accumulated in this life, like some of them are good and some of them are not so good, right? Then think about past lives, countless past lives, all the karma, it's kind of scary, think of all these different propensities to take different types of rebirth, and which of them, it's like what is that wheel you turn in the casino? A roulette. Yeah, it's like a roulette. I was thinking Russian roulette. I was like, not Russian roulette, but okay, it's roulette. Yeah, it's like a roulette. You spin the roulette and drop the ball in. Like each of the different numbers each of the different slots is a different karma I've created. Like, where's the ball going to land? If it lands here, really good. If it lands here, like really bad. So it's kind of like that when we die. Especially we haven't practiced Dharma. The more we practice and prepare for death, and the more every day, every moment we direct our mind towards virtue, every time we generate a positive motivation, we're upping our chances of getting a good rebirth, of things going well as we die, right? But yeah, it can be it's very powerful to think, very seriously about how the fact that we're going to die and what's going to happen at that kind of period of transition to a next life. So yeah, and then so Tsongkhapa says, after death, just like a shadow follows the body, the results of black and white karma follow. So wherever we go, we can't shake our shadow, it sticks with us. So just like that, whatever kind of karma we've created, that's what we're going to experience in the future. We can't shake it, just like we can't shake our shadow. So after death, just like a shadow follows the body. So as certain, it's like that kind of certainty, without any doubt. The results of black and white karma we've created, that's what we're going to experience. Now, luckily, karmas are triggered, right? So at the time of death, when you think about the time of death and what kind of karma will be triggered, the main factor is our state of mind as we're dying, right? So the state of mind that we approach and then go through the process of dying with. And we have some control over that. And that's why it's so important to practice and imagine going through the 8 stages of absorption at the time of death, and kind of practice what kind of state of mind do I want to have as the final kind of sparks of this life, the final energy of this life is draining away. Like, how do I want to experience that? So if we practice now, then we can have more control. Just like as we fall asleep, if we practice generating a virtuous mind as we fall asleep now, we can have a bit more control over what sort of things we dream about. Yeah. Okay. We're over time for lunch now. So let's stop for an hour and a half break for lunch. Yeah. I'm sorry we didn't get to any meditation so far, but I promise this afternoon we'll definitely do some meditation. But also one reason I haven't led so much meditation is because you all are old students, so you know how to meditate on these things on your own. So hopefully it's a bit more beneficial to just explain things. But we'll do some meditation this afternoon. Okay, enjoy your lunch and see you back in an hour and 1.5 hours at about 2:05.